And Brian's got the skills.
Progress Toward Democracy. Hey, Ruthann. Oh, it's Brian Stetton and Ruthann. I'm Arthur Theo, and quite a bit to talk about. I had a personal experience that I could generalize as something else. We'll talk about that later, as well as the news cycle. I want to introduce our guest. Jason Unruhe is the last name. Unruhe?
Mm-hmm.
Of Maoist Rebel News, an excellent show. You'll have to tell us the web at the URL first, and then a bit about yourself, Jason.
Oh, me. About 3.5 years ago, I was on YouTube, and I noticed nobody really did any news from the Marxist perspective, so I figured I might as well go ahead and try it. I originally did it thinking I was probably going to do it for about a month and then not care anymore, and, well, here I am 3.5 years later.
I mean, I came across your show from fellow fans that are watching your show. So, I mean, you do have an audience, I think, is growing. And some are here in the North American content, and some are actually offshore. Actually, I think it was a Facebook friend in Pakistan that introduced me to your show, of all things. But another videographer, Evil Justin, who does a similar, very far-left commentary, actually is a fan of yours and also brought up your show a number of times and so forth. Though you focus more on looking at a particular analysis of current news events. But before I ask any questions, you had a question for him, Ruthann, regarding some history?
Yeah, I was just going to ask him how he deals with, like, somebody jumped me today and started saying everything about Chairman Mao, and I wondered how Jason deals with that, since he's called Maoist rebel.
Oh, yeah, it's the Mao killed 50 billion people argument.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, was it 30 million,
it was the
45
million, but yeah.
70 million, 80 million, 100 million, or whatever the number happens to be recently. So we just make the joke that Mao killed the multiverse. He built a spaceship, and he travels through each dimension, killing all the different people. But in reality, the claim that tens of millions of people died is actually pretty fallacious. There was an organization, a communist organization, the Leading Lights. What they did was they sat down with one of the books making these claims. It was I can't remember, it was Jasper Becker or Roderick McFarger, and they poured through his so-called scientific analysis to get how many people died. He literally admits that he entirely fabricated certain numbers because they didn't exist. And he altered official numbers because he didn't like what they were. And that's pretty goddamn dishonest. I mean, you're just literally fabricating numbers and not even going to the point. Like he even says right there, well, no statistic for this count, so I'm just going to count this. Oh, and then certain groups of people, he counts them as having died twice. Like you can actually go and read and see it.
Pinko's laughing about it. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, obviously, the Communist Party might have had the greatest of intentions with the communist ideology, but I mean, it did pan out to become more of a very totalitarian society to this day. And now, at this point, they're a better form of capitalism than we are, and still no democracy. Really. Matter of fact, it's proof that you can have capitalism without democracy, unfortunately, I think. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I wouldn't really call China all that great today, and in fact, although a lot of people dislike it, I particularly despise it.
Yes.
In Foxconn alone, there was, the outrageous story of all the people committing suicides and whatnot. Oh. But going back to the famine, a lot of people seem to leave out the fact that it was caused by the weather. Pretty much the same thing that the actually smaller famine that happened in the Soviet Union under Stalin's leadership, and that one's massively exaggerated. In fact, most of the evidence against the one against Stalin actually comes from a known Nazi who literally used pictures from the Holocaust as proof that it happened decades afterwards. But yeah, it's massively overblown, and these are the same people who generally scream this as loud as they can, tend to ignore things like all the people that starved to death during the Great Depression.
Right.
Although I think few people could actually blame the Great Depression on communism, although there's a certain number of libertarians that actually do. But
no, I've never heard that one before. But,
yes,
I mean, the Communist Party
actually don't know that happened.
Yeah.
A lot of Americans actually don't know that actually happened, that people starved to death during the Great Depression.
You're probably right. That history
well,
being
what kind of figures were published on that? Because I don't recall reading about that. I believe it.
I've heard a number as high as 12 million. But even then, that's kind of suspicious.
That's interesting.
That's
interesting.
I know I read it somewhere years ago, and I didn't write down the source.
But it made an impression on you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, during that period of time, the Communist Party of the United States of America was a very strong force that the government and the elite feared. And they fought for social and economic justice and lobbied for what is now currently Social Security. That's something that's really buried in history. And it was their activism and basically Xeroxing, well, the equivalent of that, and getting labor unions out to march and working with the Socialist Party, which split off later because there were disagreements over what was called the common term, Communist International. I mean, some members recognized Stalin, some didn't, but that's neither here nor now. The CPUSA itself, Communist Party of America, was really fighting for the people and pushed through some major reform. If they didn't exist, the New Deal probably wouldn't have happened, because they played a role in helping to rally the people to pressure the White House. I would suspect.
I think to some degree. I'm not really good with American Marxist history, but from what I understand, it was fairly popular among Marxists.
Okay. Well, I mean, American society is primarily a business or corporate-run society where human rights and human needs are primarily secondary, if not suppressed altogether, for the need of profits, for the need for the investor class or elites to see profits bloom. I assume where you are in Canada, pretty much the same. How are you guys coping with Harper? He's very conservative character. It's really not that much different than a
You don't like him.
Oh, his popularity has dropped off to like only 35%.
Does he have
49%?
Oh.
49% outright oppose him, according to the last Abacus poll. He's extremely unpopular. He's silenced so many people. He's muzzled climate change scientists. He was, in my opinion, pretty much outright caught condoning torture in Afghanistan. An MP brought it. Member of Parliament brought it forward. He emailed the defense minister, the prime minister, and then if ever everybody was ignoring him, he brought it right out onto the floor of Parliament. And then they announced, okay, we're going to do an investigation. And then Parliament got shut down like a couple days later.
Oh,
and then the investigation never happened.
Well, that's not surprising. You know that. That's
So it's pretty bad. How's the social safety nets holding up there? I've heard there's been some attempts to privatize some of it, that programs for getting food distributed to the poor, that some of them have been cut back, attempts at privatizing the healthcare system. Have those attempts been made, or have the people been able to pretty much stave it off?
There has been. There's been a couple of attempts to privatize healthcare. They've been met with a fair amount of resistance. Most of that has taken the form of just cutting budgets and saying we don't have money, and then a couple days later announcing, oh, by the way, we're buying a bunch of new fighter jets from the U.S.
Yeah. Okay.
Down to money, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's remarkably disgusting, isn't it? What's the you say the popular support has gone way downhill. In America, there's almost a 50-50 type of split when it comes to Republicans versus Democrats. And it's polled that way, and it's mainly so the American public is so disenfranchised that the majority of them don't vote. They don't bother. They feel it doesn't make any difference. So I know Canada's participation rate is higher than here. And those that do participate are so heavily indoctrinated by the corporate-controlled media. That their choices can be badly misguided, especially if they're sitting watching Fox News, 4 hours out of any given day. And it does strike me as a little bit better in Canada. I guess, what's the main news network there? CBC. It's a bit more liberal, perhaps a bit more like our national public radio, I guess.
Yeah, it's state-owned, okay. And it is fairly liberal. I mean, in terms of state media, it's actually really, really good.
Okay.
It's far better than a lot of state media I've ever seen from anybody else.
Yeah, I believe that.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still liberal. Obviously, it stays within a fairly narrow political spectrum. Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be there, because we're both sort of far to the left of that. I did catch a show that interviewed Chris Hedges on Canadian TV, and that character that was interviewing him almost started behaving like a Fox News anchor and just attacking him and so forth. And it was kind of surprising for a network that's rather liberal. But when you start
it was the
criticizing,
CBC.
Yeah, you can Google and look for it. I think when you start criticizing the nature of the elites themselves, then you start crossing the line even with the liberals. And I've really enjoyed, and quite a few have actually, your critique of the Young Turks, which you did recently in a video, right?
Yeah.
Quite interesting.
Yeah. All I did was just pretty much just freak out, and that was it. That wasn't even really planned or anything.
No, it's a good rant. It's a good rant, and it was actually. You don't think so, but I thought it was very well thought out. Because the major point is that in a representative democracy, or I should say, the nature of a representative democracy can't function in our form of capitalism, can it? It's just not possible.
Yeah, that's the really weird thing about Cenk Uygur. He's always on the precipice of understanding and getting it, and then at the last second he pulls back every time. It's like he's teasing people.
Well, I don't think he can get it, or he's just too caught up in the system. Once you get to that point of actually criticizing the economic system itself, then you've gone too far. I mean, and he doesn't seem to want to cross that road. And so you were back to, and the right-wingers are doing this too, that it must be crony capitalism, that it's just the money being filtered out to a few politicians, and if there was a way to fix that, everything would be fine and dandy. Never mind the fact that was always a problem to the very, very beginning of our nations itself.
Yeah, if we get money out of politics, the whole system runs on money.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we'd all be able to live underwater if we could just take the air out of respiration.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, there's no way to really back out of it. But, do you think that there are any reformist solutions, or eventually we're going to have to head toward some type of, I should say, revolutionary change?
It's one of those things where you really can't reform it because of the very nature of it. The way it used to always get posed to me as a kid was that, you have to have balance. There needs to be a balance between these two things. but like between the will of the people and corporate power. But that itself is based on a false idea that these two things are just things that exist. It poses a situation like where you like strawberries and you like bananas. You like that strawberries are sweet, but you like the convenience of holding a banana. So when you go to the market to buy fruit, you say, okay, I'll buy half strawberries, half bananas. And then there you go. Now you've got the best of both worlds to an extent. But the problem is that the will of the people and, you know, corporate power, greed, capitalism, whatever name you care to put to it, aren't these two separate things that merely exist side by side. They stand in opposition to each other. It's a contradiction. They're not two isolated things. They're continually battling against each other. So they're not two isolated things that you can just put on a scale and balance. There's a scale, but realizing that they're also shooting at each other at the same time, and the scale is getting hit in the meantime. It's a contradiction of interest, and you can't balance those two things. One or the other has to win. But logically, the bosses can't exist without workers, but the workers can exist without bosses.
Exactly.
The contradiction has to inevitably be resolved.
We'd like to ask people if you want to call in. Our number is 424-675-8317. That's 424-675-8317.
I mean, you see attempts on a smaller scale to for workers to try to control their own means of production. The cooperatives, for example, so-called, or in a revolutionary sense, the takeover of factories by workers in countries like Argentina. There was a film about that. The name of it evades me. That was very good. If somebody remembers,
yes,
please tell me.
What they're doing is they're tackling the contradictions that exist within that one workplace, the boss and the workers. And those contradictions are in a smaller location, are easier to deal with. When you're talking about changing everything in the country, you're taking on the biggest, largest contradiction of all.
Yeah. It does seem to be almost an insurmountable task. You know, I liken it in many ways to society being sort of caught in an ancient monarchy, in a sense. And everybody's the peasants, and the private power is akin to the king. And people occasionally come up to the castle with their pitchforks and torches, but I mean, they're just overpowered by, you know, all the knights with the swords and the burning arrows and so forth, but they beg and plead for something, for some type of reform, and occasionally they get it. Once in a while there's a revolution where they can overpower the guard. And unfortunately, I think we're still in that kind of mode. In some ways, it's never changed. You know,
in all our great fairy tales.
We have a call from Nicholas, and he's got a question for Jason. Hello, Nicholas.
Hello.
Hey, Nick, how are you?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, by the way,
fine.
this is Nick, who actually used to do the show with me about 2 years ago.
Ah, okay.
Oh, wow.
All right. Hello,
Wow.
Nick.
Pleasure to meet you, Nick.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for letting me on. I have a question. I was reading in the Militant, which is a socialist newspaper here in America, and I guess in Canada too. This was a couple months ago. They had an article on how the Canadian military is wanting to expand its presence into Africa, and setting up a couple bases in Africa. And I was wondering if I could get some commentary on that from Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually a really frightening prospect, considering that our resources are tremendously limited. I mean, the U.S. has a population 10 times the size of our own, and has a hell of a lot of financial power to put behind that, but we don't have it. We just don't have it. And to think that, we're going to start stomping off trying to be the U.S. now is it's pretty ridiculous. But, I mean, it is done for a good reason. One of the things that a lot of people couldn't understand here in Canada was why our government was so incensed about going to Afghanistan. Now, obviously, right after 9/11, it was obvious. We have to stand in solidarity, blah, blah, blah.
Wow,
but why we're still doing it after all this time? I mean, the war is insanely unpopular here.
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
77%, are against the war. But, we have our own imperial interests in that. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is that Canada does have a tremendous amount invested in international mining. And, in fact, Canada has the single worst human rights record when it comes to international mining. I mean, we're actually really, really
worse
bad.
Worse than China? I thought China was just horrendous.
No, we are the undisputed worst for international mining.
Oh,
yeah, I believe
but
it.
We fly quite nicely under the radar underneath China and the United States, so we go pretty much unnoticed.
Mm.
I mean, they all have a very bad record. I mean, there was the Chilean mining accident that was received a lot of media attention with miners stuck underground for months. But actually, it's very common for that country. Pakistan, I recall reading about a mining disaster there just a few months ago. I mean, the industry itself has always been terrible.
China has one every week.
Getting worse every week.
Just about. There for a while it was every week. I was keeping real close track. Yeah.
I mean, the concept of safe working conditions is out the window. And the concept of unions to fight for those working conditions is bad. So it's worse with Canada. That's a shame.
But you're saying that Canada has the mining interest at heart, and that's why they may be doing the African run.
Yeah, I mean, it's primarily that, but there is the also gaining influence by being in the region, and I mean Africa is a huge, still to a large extent, very untapped resource in terms of mining, and they're pushing our own imperial interests. One of the things that I did notice is that Canada does have a very unique imperial position. That because aside from having our own imperialist interests, we are still subservient to the U.S. power, and we're still subservient to the UK's power. So we're in a very unique position that a lot of countries aren't in. We do have our own interests, but we are still, to a large degree, bowing to the crown and bowing to the wants of the U.S. government. So we're just in a very strange position there.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the financial elite of Canada are very much intertwined and own a lot in the natural resources sector, don't they? I mean, as I recall, for example, when you look at the stock exchanges, say like the Vancouver Stock Exchange, one of those which has a scandal every other week. You have a lot of mining companies that trade there and are looking for properties all over the world, as I recall, Indonesia and so forth, as well as I recall reading about new diamond veins, for example, being discovered in your country itself in certain regions. So I guess that, yeah.
Well, those precious, those micro minerals that are right now so important for some of the new technology, the rare minerals. That's one of the biggies. But I thought that most of that was in China or
the rare earths.
Yeah.
A lot of that is in Africa.
It is in Africa? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the rare earth minerals. That's crazy. What other industries would you say are in a similar vein in terms of, for example, exploiting either labor or land elsewhere?
There's always there's for land and there's like some from agriculture, but it's like to a very, very large extent, pretty much just the mining. But there's a lot of little stuff, but like this one of the things where it's really about the mining. These are just like little things that they can grab up in the meantime while they're doing it.
The banks in Canada, I think, a little bit differently structured than here. You didn't have a real financial crisis like we did here. apparently you had regulations in place that prevented a meltdown and the need for a bailout. But,
we did have a bailout.
Oh, you did?
We just found out in the last month or so that we did have a bailout, and it was actually covered up.
Ah.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, well. Yeah, well, we shouldn't be surprised.
And it was in the news. It was in the news for 2 days, and then it disappeared.
So some people still don't know it then in your country.
Well, I hope you do a video about that.
It was on the CBC. It wasn't to the extent that your bailout was, but ours was there. But it was more the fact that they had actually hit it than the fact that it really existed.
Okay, I could see that. Yeah, you have a much stronger, it appears to me, Native movement in Canada. It seems like the Native Americans are doing much more than the ones here in the States. Do you find that true, or am I just confused?
I would say that's true to a degree. I would say they're probably more highly concentrated here.
Okay. Now regarding go ahead.
I couldn't really just figure out why that is. I honestly just don't know. I mean, it's true to some degree, but I honestly have never been able to figure out why. Just why it's there.
Right. I mean, I see a lot about it, and I mean, it seems like a very active movement. So, yeah, I'm saying bravo. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I notice, and talking to some Canadian friends, is information flows up, and a number of people in Canada will watch, say, programming from America, but the flip side doesn't exist. You don't have anybody watching CBC in this country at all. This country is almost like an island. They don't want anyone else to.
That's why we have Jason, so we get,
exactly.
See?
Well, it's largely for market reasons. The United States has such a large television market that anything coming from the other side would not be as profitable to the degree that it would be for something that's from the U.S. In Canada, any TV station, by law, we have to have a minimum of like 30 or 33% Canadian programming. Because if we didn't have that law, we virtually wouldn't have any Canadian programming at all. It's much more profitable to do it in the States because there's a much bigger audience. And thus, even when you syndicate things to other countries, it's still buying a U.S. show or syndicating a U.S. show is still cheaper than making one here. So there is a tremendous profit motive reason behind that.
Yes, I remember that, actually. That law was in place even for shows made in Canada for American consumption, which there isn't that many. I mean, going way back, a few decades ago, there was a show called Second City TV that was very popular. And because it was an hour long or something, they had to have a sketch that was related to Canada. And then they had the Mackenzie brothers or some such comedy team.
Yes.
But don't they still, I mean, they used to have a lot of shows that were shown here were done around the Vancouver area.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Really
I don't watch
Canadian
TV
show.
now, so I don't know.
It's a U.S. production company making for a U.S. audience, paying U.S. taxes, and it's just cheaper. Well, it was cheaper to film here.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah.
Well,
we do have a question here from area code 905. As soon as I get him in. Hello, 905.
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
Hi, Jason. I'm a longtime fan of yours. Enjoy watching you undress a lot of the nonsense that Sun Media perpetrates. I had a question for you regarding the Occupy movement, or in general, I guess, collective dissent. Do you see sort of a second wave of action coming along anytime soon? What are sort of the prospects for some progressive movements to really pick up? I mean, one of the critiques, I guess, of the Occupy movement was that it was the energy of it was essentially usurped by, sort of our dominant political forces, and it sort of piddled out into more or less not too much, although I guess it did raise awareness and start a conversation. But do you see part two, and what are sort of its prospects, I guess, of yielding real change?
I think that's a really up in the air question, because since there is no central leadership to the Occupy movement, and there's no prevailing ideology within it, like there's no ideological core, there's pretty much a bunch of different ideas floating around at any one time, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen, given that they do have their own kind of interests. I mean, there's probably a fair amount of social democrats, and social democrats in the group aren't going to want to do the same things that Marxists are going to want to do. Marxists want to go all the way and smash the entire unjust system, and social democrats are going to be like, well, we need to hold back, and we have to let that balance come through. But if there was one core leadership that was leading everything, then it would be much easier to predict. But as for the actual movement being usurped by the main political parties, I pretty much saw that coming, and I think a lot of far left actually really saw that coming. It was the same thing that rap music went through in the early '90s. It was a tremendous force that spoke about the overwhelming poverty and the conditions, and then when that message became too loud, they tried to shut it down and ban rap music, and it's blah, 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 and all this, and it's taking over, it's infecting our kids. And then when they realized they couldn't get rid of it, they just had the corporations snatch it up and then, homogenize it, package it, and sell it to whatever it is that they wanted it to be. So we really shouldn't be surprised that the same thing would happen with Occupy Wall Street.
Actually, I would say rap did even worse than that. It basically sold a certain message to black youth that if you follow this sort of nonsensical lifestyle, you can become a rich singer. And it was
get rich or die trying. That's essentially what it literally turned into.
Yeah, it's a very bad message. I know there's Move On and so forth in the States sort of attempted to, let's say, co-opt part of Occupy, I think with limited success. Occupy overall, I mean, the people I've met, very, very wary and suspicious of any type of co-optation. But there's very little interest in trying to engage with the electoral system. It's more of a, we're disgusted with it, we're not going to participate. So it's hard to see how it's going to drive any type of change. It's debatable whether it's dead or not. I think it would take another shoe to drop, something to go wrong with the system to once again really revive it on any level. I sort of describe it as a awakening of the proletariat consciousness at best. But there's been a movement in your country, though, in Montreal, hasn't there? Is it still going on? It was
the Montreal student strike.
Banging the pots and pans and things,
I've always thought it was tremendously hilarious listening to the bourgeois politicians going, "Oh, the youth, they're so apathetic and they won't get involved and they won't do anything, and then as soon as they start doing something, it's like, oh my God, it's terrorists."
Yeah, much like the Egyptians, who were written off as Neanderthals, but the moment they actually started calling for democracy, it's like, whoa, wait a second, we didn't expect, or we can't show this, right? Because it just doesn't fit the.
Oh yeah. The story. I mean, Arabs were considered to be genetically allergic to democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy.
Anyway, thanks for your time, Jason. I'll continue to listen to the show tonight.
Good, thank you.
Nicholas, thanks so much. You don't have any other questions, Nicholas? Okay.
Okay. Well, if anyone else would like to call in, our number is 424-675-8317. That's 424-675-8317. I wanted to commend you, Jason, on your backdrop and everything. It looks very nice. You look very professional, sitting there ranting. It's good. I like it.
Yeah, you're actually trying to produce a news show. Actually,
yeah,
it
exactly.
Has a very professional feel to it.
Yeah, and it has that.
I had tried to experiment with like an entire news show once a week, but time constraints and the editing process takes a fairly long time, and it takes a long time to get all that done.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have enough time. I don't have like an entire professional staff to do everything that I would really want to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're doing a great job. Please keep that up and keep more coming. Definitely. Going back to the protest among the students in Montreal, I heard that there was some pretty severe injuries, and all of this is being completely blacked out by the mainstream media here. Totally, it hasn't been brought up. Just a few articles here and there in the alternative media. Nothing even in the New York Times or anything like that.
Well, you put change and young people in the same sentence, and they get pretty scared.
Yeah, but I heard that a student was nearly paralyzed. Another lost an eye. I mean, have there been some pretty bad injuries among the students by police brutality, or what exactly is happening there?
Yeah, they can get pretty bad. You know, it depends day to day. It depends on what they were doing and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there have been quite a few injuries from what I hear. Unfortunately, I've not been able to make it down there due to the fact that I have to work, and unfortunately, I'm stuck on night shift. So that makes, just about doing anything impossible.
Well, we can all sympathize with that. All of us in the far left are struggling poor. That seems to be the nature of the far left. If you're left Marxist, you have no money. Means very little bit. Yeah. But I guess that's in part drives us too.
I just recently got a car, so that would make things a little bit easier. I got called an elitist for supposedly bragging about my car on Twitter, and apparently my '94 Volkswagen Golf is elitist. That I got less than $400.
Well,
That sounds
elitist.
like a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Wow. We have Carrie here who has a question. As soon as I can get him in here, what's there? I'll let him ask it. Carrie, you're on.
Hi, Jason. You might know me as Lenny Cat. I don't know if you do. Anyway, my question is about how you said that Canada's in the unique position of being both an imperialist power and being a victim of imperialism. I think that's very similar to Greece's situation, because Greece does benefit from imperialism. It does benefit from the exploitation of the third world. But yet, it's being dragged into an austerity by the Germany and France and the big European powers. Is that sort of like what the position Canada is in at all? And also, stop stealing my joke.
What was that last part of the end?
Stop stealing my own joke.
Your joke? What
yeah,
joke is yours?
About Mao killing the entire universe. I told you that joke.
Okay, yeah, that was you. Okay.
Now you know who he is. Okay.
Well, I don't think it's to the same degree, because we're not in as bad a situation as Greece is in. I would say the European powers like Germany and whatnot are looking at Greece like it's a damned annoyance, and that they don't really actually want to be connected to it. Although in our case, we're on much better terms with the United States. I mean, even when we've had the most liberal of liberal politicians, I can remember, what was his name? Trudeau told, I believe it was Reagan. He told Reagan to shove it. Literally, like on the air, told him to shove it because he didn't like what he was doing. Even in those times, we were still really, really good friends because we do an extraordinary amount of business with each other. So I think that the relationship there is a lot stronger, because after all, we are your only English-speaking neighbor. So.
Yeah. Well, definitely. Go ahead.
No, I just said, yeah.
Pinko is saying that...
I think Germany would be very happy if Greece just disappeared.
I personally think
to them, they're just an annoyance that they don't really want to put up with.
I don't think they want them to disappear. I think they want to pay Germany its supposed debt to Germany. So Germany's basically saying that you owe us money and you have to make your people suffer to repay that money. You have to make your people suffer so our people can be better off. Is that not imperialism, straight out?
Yeah, I would say so.
I mean, Germany,
especially considering that
unfair. Go ahead.
Especially since the Greek people didn't exactly ask for that money to be borrowed. It's pretty much something the government and the elites did.
Right.
I mean, I don't have any illusions that they'll try to break down Greece and then just use them as like the Mexico of Europe. I could foresee something like that happening.
I think that's kind of happening now in a way. Trying to privatize the assets of Greece and so forth. Greece was always driven more by tourism than, say, export growth. Export growth has always been what drove Germany's economy. And so hoping to expect that from other countries in the Eurozone makes no sense.
Well, Germany does have some exports. It does have the car industry. It does have the beer industry of theirs and stuff like that.
That's what I was saying. Germany has always been driven by export growth. They've maintained a strong relationship with labor, I would say more so in their country. Even that's getting hurt now because Germany has a rather conservative government now. But, I mean, for example, in Germany, you have labor on the board of directors along with other elites. So workers get paid considerably more in their country than, say, the United States or probably even Canada. And they didn't outsource like crazy.
I think it'll be interesting to see how socialist this new French president is.
I'm quite anxious to see that myself. We have Julia, who knows Jason. Hello, Julia, you're on the air.
Hi. Hi, Jason. Julia, you know me from YouTube and Facebook, obviously.
Yeah.
But my question... Yeah, hello. And I hope you're doing well tonight. My question is just about, we know that the system that we have now is completely messed up. Like, we know that, what capitalism's consequences are on the world, everywhere in the world, facing kind of problems, and, you're seeing things blow up now. People are getting angry. They're getting out into the streets, and you're seeing just these global uprisings and all that. But I guess what I would like to know is, in your opinion, what do you think those of us who live in the first world can actually do in the short term? Like, if we know that what the system is just doing harmful things to our communities and all that, like what kinds of things would you suggest, that our long-term goal is a completely new system, socialism, whatever form that would take. But I'm just wondering, like, what do you think we can actually do? Like,
well, you see,
good question.
In one of those, in a lot of ways, globalization has taken some kind of power away from us. Back in the old days, we'd say, okay, well, let's just tell the textile workers to go on strike. From the certain sections of New York, which were predominantly Puerto Rican. That's now in the third world, and now they're not really within reach. And to a large extent, it's buy this certain product over here because it's made here, and then we're pretty much ended up with a mall economy where almost nothing is made here, so you can't even really choose to buy American anymore. Even if you were to say, to hell with this, and just, grab your own fabric and then make your own clothes. Well, unfortunately, you're still going to have to be grabbing them from some kind of encomienda in Latin America. Yes, you're still going to be taking cotton that was made in the third world.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, globalization has made that, even just doing that, next to impossible. In terms of anything you could do, aside from the usual picketing and whatnot, if you could find some way to buy purely American, you could do that. But in terms of globalization, that's limited us very, very much in that capacity.
I think the best thing to do is to do what you're doing, actually, and continue to raise people's awareness of the oppressive nature of capitalism. I mean, the more we raise people's awareness of capitalism, the elites, and so forth, the more we can perhaps push for change. Because
right, but Julia is asking for a hands-on kind of thing, and so when you're raising people's awareness, it's like they need to see that you are walking your talk. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of masturbation. Okay.
Well, the other thing I will say too is that I think people in this country anyway are fully aware that the system is not working. Like, why the system is not working, that's where you're seeing the debate about.
Exactly.
These very radical right libertarians. Like, I mean, I live in New Hampshire, and it's full of these, kinds of very far right, Ron Paul, Austrian economics kind of people. And they just say, everything that's wrong with the system, it's just the government's fault, and they don't realize that there's problems inherent to capitalism that they just kind of deny, or they just blame it on the government. And then you have people who are, reformist leftists who just say, bourgeois socialists, you could call them, who just say, okay, we just need, more Keynesianism, a bigger welfare state, and that's where we need to stop.
Yeah, obviously that's not the answer either.
Yeah.
Well, we have John on the line who says he's a Wall Street analyst.
Real quick. I just want to say this real quick. I mean, the thing is, people point out that the socialist, communist countries failed and so forth. How many times has capitalism failed? Probably about 70 times over the past couple of hundred years. And it's getting more and more expensive to save it. There was a professor, Colin Crouch, who gave a lecture recently, The Strange Non-Death of Neoliberalism. We keep on bailing it out. It keeps on getting more and more expensive to save this variant of capitalism. It's getting outrageous. And no one's talking about alternatives because no one believes that there is an alternative. And that's the perception that has to change.
Can I just jump in for 1 second right before you move to the next caller? There is a book that just came out last year called America Beyond Capitalism. And, I mean, it kind of advocates more of like a market socialist approach, like cooperatives, credit unions, all of that. But I just think it's interesting now that you're seeing, like, that's where the working class in this country is going, like in the United States, I should say. I don't know what it is in Canada, but they're kind of moving towards that, regardless if they say, okay, capitalism is the problem, they're taking up, solutions that are anti-capitalist in a sense, in a very, I think in a very strong sense. And
Julia, you said that book is called America Beyond Capitalism?
Yes. It's by, I have it right in front of me, it's called by Gar Alperovitz, I think I'm pronouncing that. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting book that I would just recommend because it just kind of shows you like the mentality of many working people today. Okay. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Glad you were here. John, you say you're a Wall Street analyst and you had something to add to the conversation.
Yeah, I wanted to say that the problem is that we don't have capitalism. Capitalism actually works, but we haven't seen what capitalism looks like in a very, very long time. That's the problem. Because the reality is that there are certain functions that the government needs to provide. There are certain social services that the government does need to provide for.
Right.
And the rendition of capitalism that has embraced this country has really brainwashed a lot of people because the fact is that we are a world now of extremists. people think that everything is black or white, night or day, and the reason why is because it's very simple to understand that. But the reality is, the truth is that that something it lies in between. There's shades of gray, and it's difficult for people to understand. For instance, in my opinion, most of the utilities and energy sectors should be government controlled. And the reason why is because that's part of the basic necessities that people need to survive. If you don't have that government control, you're going to have industry collusion, which is what we have been seeing. A similar thing with healthcare. We do need universal healthcare. But of course, when you throw in these so-called socialist elements, you have the extremists out there who don't understand the fine details. And so then they scream, "You're a socialist," right? And they're brainwashed by the media talking heads who are paid off by the elitists and the ultra-capitalists, or fascists, I call them, to basically advocate these extremist viewpoints. So it ultimately comes down to people understanding what is going on. And, of course, people go to the media to do so. And the media is the biggest
John, how would you
enemy.
describe capitalism?
Yeah, it sounds like it's more words.
I would describe it as a system whereby it's obviously fair to everyone. People are held accountable. There's no accountability anymore in the public sector or the private sector. That's a big element right there. You get the corporations out of the picture in terms of the control. I mean, corporate America runs Washington, and that is the big part of the problem. You know, they buy our politicians. They actually engineered the whole free trade agreement, which has destroyed this country, which is unfair trade, and this is why all the jobs have gone overseas. Corporate America used to provide a symbiotic relationship for this country several decades ago. But over the past few decades, it's become cannibalistic, and all they care about is the corporate profits. That is why we are currently in the midst of a depression.
Right.
Corporate profits are at record highs. And
well, this is what we talk about here.
We talk about this all the time.
We talk about this all the time.
I pretty much agree with you, with the exception that capitalism really is seeking more growth of capital from accumulated capital. So you always have that capitalist class. And the corporation is just basically a tool for the capitalist class to accumulate more capital faster and more powerful.
Right, so there's nothing here for the people.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
thank
I don't
you,
really
John,
see...
for calling in.
Well, I mean, the first thing there, he used the word fair in capitalism.
And
it's a system
sort of
based on inequality.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
You really can't have fair in a system that's based on being unfair. And like I said, this is the thing that we started the show with, balance. He's essentially asking for balance.
Right.
And you can't balance two things that are in contradiction, because they're not two separate, isolated, metaphysical things. They're two things contesting with each other. So you essentially be trying to regulate a battle between two opposing sides.
I mean, capitalism by definition needs greed, right, to succeed in finding innovation and so forth.
Hell, it doesn't just need greed. It says nothing else can exist.
It pushes a very hard type of individualism. I mean, Marx pretty much predicted that capitalism would destroy itself for a number of reasons, because he expected competition to destroy most businesses and lead to monopolies, that he expected competition to drive workers' wages down, that he expected liquidity crisis. You had a number of reforms over the years that sort of, that he didn't foresee that stopped that. The growth of unions, the New Deal, and so forth. But now, as they're peeling it all away and going back toward a laissez-faire, like a Gilded Age, it's accelerating toward Marx's predictions, right? Or that's the way it appears to me.
He also didn't see the polarization between the third world and the first world coming either. That you could give people in the first world a better living standard by exploiting people in the third world harder. I mean, think about the computers that we own. I mean, let's face it, if that was made by first world labor, we wouldn't be able to afford it. We wouldn't be able to afford the materials that went into it, and we wouldn't be able to afford the labor. So they've given us a better living standard by grinding the third world even harder. He also didn't see that coming.
Right.
Yeah, and the sort of neo-colonialism into third world countries, it's sort of like a societal arbitrage to grow our economies. But it's at such a point where it's not sustainable. I mean, America alone is 5% of the world's population, but consumes about a third of the world's resources. What are your thoughts on looming environmental catastrophe, by the way, now that I think of it?
And don't get too depressing. Brian doesn't have that.
I am very much a believer in global warming, like in that it's happening, and that's kind of an unfortunate name. Climate change would be better, because colder places are getting hotter and colder places are getting warmer. Yeah. So it's not necessarily a warming all the way around. I am a very big believer that is something that's looming over the edge, and then something that is coming, and it is being driven by capitalism, or at least essentially in any kind of a way the profit motive. One of the things that most annoys me is the claim that the entire concept of global warming is a communist conspiracy, only because the Soviets were one of the first people to actually acknowledge that there might be something to it. They essentially said, there might be something to this, we don't know, back in the 80s. So therefore, it's a communist conspiracy. I mean, to really understand anything, you only have to look so far as the people who support it and the people who are against it. I mean, it's obviously easier to pollute than to safely get rid of any kind of waste.
Right.
Yeah. So obviously the profit motive is always going to dictate to you to pollute. There will be the odd people that will recognize that and say, okay, no, we really can't do this. But when it really comes down to Wall Street, or I hate to target Wall Street because Wall Street is a symptom of capitalism. It isn't capitalism itself.
No. I mean, some of the worst of the capitalist class linger there, so I suppose,
whatever's cheapest will be the route that we'll take, and we'll try to knock down anything that could possibly stand in its way to enhance profits.
Right. We have 905 is back. Hello.
Yes, hello. It's not Nick, by the way. It's Tony. But
hi, Tony.
Just to I guess maybe unpack a little bit of what the previous caller had said. About we don't have, or there hasn't been enough real capitalism. I mean, Slavoj Žižek, for example, has a pretty amusing take on that, and he says, well, that was also, sort of what the communists said about communism in Russia. Well, we didn't have enough communism, so that therefore, things fell apart. And so, when he talks about things like, free trade and our country went to hell as a result, free trade, that initiative, along with other things like it, are part and parcel of capitalism. Of course, you're going to see a freeing up of all sort of barriers and regulations. So I would argue, sort of against the thinking that it's, just free trade's fault, or some people say, well, it's the bankers' fault. I mean, whether it's blank Fife or this or that guy, it does not matter. Somebody else will be there to replace them tomorrow, because the things that compel people to behave in such abhorrent ways are what underpins the system, basically. So one thing that I think people, when I speak to a lot of my colleagues, I work in the Ontario public service, so with relatively educated people, and we have discussions, because obviously now we're in the crosshairs of neoliberalism in the province of Ontario, and being part of a public sector union is, something to be ashamed of, I guess. So we're told. But I try to educate, my colleagues and say, look, there's something bigger afoot here. And it's as though people they do to an extent acknowledge it. They are at the precipice of looking at it, but they're almost afraid or something that they're looking into the abyss, and so they sort of back off and they little things to blame, like again the bankers or free trade sort of thing.
Yeah,
I agree. Go ahead.
Yeah. But going back to the Soviet Union, they didn't have communism; they had socialism. And I believe when Slavoj Žižek was saying we needed more communism, needed the actual stateless society, the drive towards what the ultimate goal is. I mean, obviously the Soviet Union did stagnate into socialism and never did reach communism.
So what country would you give as an example of pure communism? Has there ever been?
I don't think there's ever been.
To a very limited extent, the Paris Commune, for however long it lasted, and not very long.
Right.
But again, this was the first time it had ever been attempted, and it was only a small, isolated area within a larger country, so obviously it wasn't going to survive very long. The closest was China, in which a handful of the communes had actually made the transition to communism, and they were held up as an example for people to follow. So in a few isolated areas of China during the revolution, not during the revolution, but afterwards, had actually reached it, but they were very, very small.
Well, that's what people say, here, because we have communes in the United States, or cooperative living, whatever you want to call them, and some of them are very communistic-based. But there again, it's a small group, a small amount of people. So we've never seen it on a big scale then. Yeah.
Keep in mind also, they're also doing it within the belly of the beast, as Chase said.
Yeah. Right.
And they also still, even though that they may have an egalitarian the commune that they're running, essentially all their supplies, or most of them they still have to contend with the capitalist system outside of it.
They can't still have to deal with
everything themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would say in China it was better because they could literally, there was still obviously money going around revolutionary China, although it was used strictly for trade when dealing with the communes that had actually reached communism. Because obviously you can't just all of a sudden take everything that they were doing and completely detach that from the pricing system that was going on in the rest of the country. That'd be insane. That's one of the things that Che did point out, that even in the socialist economy, you couldn't completely detach everything from the world capitalist system and its price settings. It just wouldn't be possible. And I recommend a book called Politics and Economics in the Transition to Socialism by Carlos Tablada, who took a bunch of Che's writings on different things and then formed them into one coherent work. Essentially, it gives the entire instruction manual of what the actual Cuban economy went through from the revolution till up to about the 70s.
Politics and Economics, and who was the author again? Carlos
Tablada. Politics and Economics in the Transition to Socialism.
And speaking of books, you're working on a book, aren't you? Perhaps you want to tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, it's just my relative ideas on certain things. There's nothing really spectacular about it. It's not going to change the world or anything. Obviously I'm no Slavoj Žižek, but it's just my own ideas. That's it. It's nothing really special.
Žižek's quite a brilliant man. One of the few self-avowed communists that's a big public speaker. I can't really think of anyone else that actually does. I mean, there are other intellectuals that are up at that level, but they don't really label themselves like that.
I think David Harvey is.
David Harvey, Richard Wolff.
You're right, yeah.
Professor Richard Wolff, I think, is a fantastic individual to follow.
Yeah, no, he's
as well as, of course, Noam Chomsky.
Yeah. No, Chomsky doesn't call himself a communist. I mean, he'll say libertarian socialism or anarcho-syndicalist. I think he's called himself a communist. But yeah, he's definitely up there. I mean, so is Tariq Ali. I think he's labeled himself more socialist.
Yeah, I'm actually just reading the Havana Declarations, where Tariq Ali gives an introduction to. So it's quite fascinating.
Yes, the Revolutions book series.
Yeah.
I have that series. I highly recommend that.
Yeah, it's fantastic reading so far. About halfway through.
Sounds like Michael Parenti, we had him as a guest on Monday. I guess he classifies himself as a Marxist, or he called himself that on that show. So, there are some very brilliant men there. They need to be heard more by the public, unfortunately.
This is exactly
marginal.
This is it.
Unfortunately, it's a cult following with people like us. Speaking of people in Canada, the healthcare system of Canada has been demonized in a major way, especially by the right, to people here in this country to sort of scare them off of wanting universal health care. Fears of, there's horribly long waits and so forth. Perhaps you can address us about that.
Oh, God, I remember that when Barack Obama first got elected, and there was that drive against universal health care. You remember Rick Scott, Conservatives for Patients' Rights? Remember that from way back?
Yeah, well, he's my governor now.
He's the governor.
I know.
Yeah, no, he was running his... he was originally with the healthcare industry. He ran a hospital management company.
And he screwed them over, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, hugest Medicare fraud in the history of this nation. And then he ran a political action committee that specialized in helping the health insurance lobby. You just named it. And now he's governor, and horrible governor. His plan for jobs growth that he implemented so far consisted of firing school teachers. So, I mean, it's just
he's a
awful.
class act.
Yeah, awful.
I remember his. I remember his ads. I made a video long time ago on that, and he's one of the few U.S. conservatives I really wanted to backhand, because he was such a liar. Just his saying, like, he was quoting a Canadian doctor, I can't remember the name, in Maclean's magazine, saying, this and this was broken. It's like, see, the Canadian healthcare system was so damaged, but being a Canadian and actually having access to Maclean's magazine, I can go and read it, and one sentence later he says we need to put these things wrong back under the government control. He was literally, like, complaining about things that were deregulated. And sometimes I really do just completely facepalm when I hear, some conservatives talk, and I mean, the conservatives in the U.S., they talk about the Canadian system, and I used to get this when I used to get into it with libertarians on YouTube, and it was like, I have universal health care. I literally know that's not true. I used to work in a hospital. I know that's not true.
Well, what are some of the myths they pushed, and what were your counters to them?
All these people are dying in the waiting room. Okay, yeah, that does happen. That happens in every country, everywhere in the world.
That's true.
It is not to any higher degree than anywhere else. If somebody says, I have a stomach ache, and, triage says whoever is the most in need is the person who gets medical care first, which unfortunately always bumps people with any kind of mental illness right to the bottom of the list, unfortunately. And they don't know the severity of what's wrong, so they say, okay, there's like two people ahead of you, and in the meantime, it's like a bleeding lesion. But nobody really knows what it is because nobody's gone through to be able to find out exactly what it was. Now, these are extremely rare, isolated incidents that happen everywhere. But, of course, the fact that it happens, in isolated incidences in the universal healthcare system doesn't seem to mean anything about the thousands who just die without it. Who die without any kind of health care.
Right. We have Evil Justin here with a question for Jason.
Hey, everybody. How are you?
Justin, hi.
Great.
Good. Jason, I've watched your videos for a long time. Enjoy them. I'm a big fan. I've heard you talk about this before, but I don't think you went into a lot of detail, or you may have in one of your videos, and I just haven't watched it. I was wondering about, you've talked about Trotskyisim before, and this is sort of a two-part question for you. First of all, what are your thoughts overall on Trotsky and his theory of permanent revolution, and why you find it as, I think you've said, fundamentally flawed? And secondly, what are your thoughts on the Socialist Equality Party that's of course, in Europe and the United States, and that is an organization that claims to be Trotskyist. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think permanent revolution is actually sustainable. Like, I mean, think about what happened right at the end of the at the beginning of the Soviet Union. You've got World War I, the population was just being utterly decimated by that. Then they go into a civil war to get rid of the people who are causing the problem. Things are even worse. You know what they need after that? 90 more years of war. You just couldn't have pushed them any harder in terms of war. I mean, you just can't. You can't. It's like almost like a kind of permanent state of war, and you just can't have that. You know, human beings just can't take that, especially when they've already been ground into the ground with, you know, the actual World War I and then a civil war, like almost at the same time. It was just too much. You just can't keep pushing it like that. I mean, ideally, if something like that could really work, I would be on board for that. But it's not a sustainable position to hold. And if that really worked, I would definitely support it. But unfortunately, you know, human beings have limitations. We can't go to war permanently. And in fact, that's one of the main links between, you know, Trotskyism and imperialism, is that it's almost a constant state of war.
I was going to say the United States seems to be at war all the time.
Well, actually, I want to throw out a thought on that really quick, because a number of people that were past Trotskyists became neoconservatives. That was actually one of the Ron Paul criticisms that was valid, because he stated that once. I mean, an example that comes to mind is Christopher Hitchens. He was a self-declared Trotsky communist and so forth. And he was a big advocate for the Iraq War. And so definitely, they took the permanent revolution to the United States. Some of the most hardcore communists in our country in the modern era became some of the worst neoconservatives. Sad to say.
God.
Yeah. Now,
they sold out
of the socialist. In terms of the Socialist Equality Party, I have had my run-ins with them. Some, I guess, semi-serious run-ins. What I did way back when I didn't have enough time to write absolutely everything I wanted to, this is going back 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, depending, I would take an article from the website and then rebroadcast it. And then it became, you're plagiarizing. Well, no, it says right there in the description, wsws.org.
Right.
I mean, is it plagiarism if you rebroadcast it and put the
and credit
say
it
that it's from them? Yeah. I mean, I don't really. Okay. In other words, this initially came from like just some guy who really hated me, and then and then it exploded with another well-known leftist website, and eventually the SCP filed DMCA's against me. Digital Millennium copyright things, and I fought those, saying, you know, things like Cassima Project, rebroadcast, like that. But they do it in text only because they don't do videos, and they never filed any DMCA's against them. So, okay, essentially, if you don't want me to rebroadcast that, okay, I won't. And then I stopped doing it. Mm-hmm. Like, they could have just said something. Okay,
right.
Whatever. The SCP is, the caller who called before, Red Nick, who I used to do videos with, he's had some of their followers threaten him because they were speaking at his university, and he was talking to them, I think it was about Trotsky or something else, and then I think they essentially told him to just shut up because they don't have political activities. They have these like group discussion info things, and as they were leaving, one guy said, "I'm going to get you." So it's not like the party did it. It was just one guy who was just being an idiot. One of the few things that people don't know about the SCP, the guy who leads it, David Green, David North. I keep forgetting which one is his fake name and which one is his real name. The guy who runs, I think it's David North is the guy who runs the Socialist Equality Party. He's also the head of, I believe it's Grand River Publishing. And the higher-ranking officials in the SEP are executives inside the publishing company.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the entire party structure is the corporate structure of this one publishing company.
Right.
That doesn't have a union.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a strict anti-union stance.
What?
Now there is, they haven't. The Socialist Equality Party is against unions.
Yes.
They do have somewhat of a valid argument behind that.
They claim that the unions are frauds. Is basically what they do.
Yes, and to an extent, you can say that.
Yeah,
I mean, if you look at the way the way the GM union just completely screwed over its, the people that it's supposed to represent.
Right.
That is true to a very large extent. I wouldn't say dump unions. I would say purge those people out of it and take the union back.
Yeah,
but it's kind of.
I agree.
It is a fairly legitimate criticism, but when you're a Marxist and you're the corporate owner of a publishing company that, according to their website, I think they make like $25 million a year or something like that. But when you're that and you're telling people to get rid of unions, it's kind of suspicious.
Yeah, no.
Although in fairness to them, there is truth to their criticism.
There is truth. Yeah, no, without a doubt. There's a lot of corruption. The unfortunate thing about unions is that they're the only counterbalancing force to private power left, really, that of any significance. There were more radical unions in the far past that decried socialism. Knights of Labor, for example. If you go back to late 1800s, early 1900s, they're all gone. And the more conservative unions survived. And I personally think the solution is to enhance the democracy in the unions themselves, perhaps some form of direct democracy in the unions to enhance. Otherwise, you end up with a management that just sort of looks at itself as a separate company that rents its workers to the business. That's no good.
Exactly. What's happened is they've created a class contradiction within the union itself.
Exactly.
I mean, look at what it's supposed to be, like how you get into the upper echelon of a union. You have to go to college and take this, labor relations course. I don't know if you have that in the States. I assume you do. But there's a thing here. Because I live in the Niagara region, I'm never too far from any of the three Niagara College campuses, and there's a labor relations, courses that you can take that you have to take if you want to be like a head union person. Well, already there we've got a guy who's never, depending on what your situation was, who may have never done any labor at all, and just walked out of college with this. I'm already above the working class type of mentality, and then put him in charge of the union. Well, guess what's going to happen? You've already created a class contradiction right there. So you have somebody who's not really connected to the workers.
Yeah, right off the bat, because you have that hierarchical structure. I wasn't aware about the SEP and its structure around the publisher. But that seems to be common with some of the left-wing movements. The Revolutionary Communist Party, that's connected to a publisher, Revolution Publishing, I guess, which is a Bob Avakian group.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like an actual company or like it's something that prints whatever, or they just print their own stuff. I'm not sure how that works. But I know the SEP, they print other stuff for other things. Like, it's a regular company that they don't acknowledge as actually connected to it. I mean, it'd be kind of hard if you were to say, David Horowitz, I'm looking for a thing to publish my latest Slavery is Great article, and, look at this company. Oh, what, it's run by a Marxist? Ugh.
Interesting. I wasn't aware of that.
It's just suspicious when you have that.
Yeah.
When you've got a $25 million a year I'm pretty sure the name is Grand River Publishing, or Rocky River Publishing, or Grand River, something like that. And to have, a $25 million a year corporation say unions are bad, it's like, oh, you're a Marxist?
Yeah, I guess it's an ends justify the means type of thing.
Oh God, I hate that. I hate it. I hate
it.
Yeah,
I hate that too, because that's basically what the conservatives do. The ends justify the means.
Yeah, I not good. Every time I hear that, I break out.
Yeah.
No.
Justin, do you have any other questions for her?
No, he left us. He left us. He had his questions. He wanted to.
He started also a little radio show spot. I noticed Wolf Propaganda. It's going to encourage him to do more of that. It was quite good.
Okay. I'm going to ask Jason, what do you think about this talk of Canada, Mexico, and the United States combining as one big power, one big country?
Oh, yeah, the North American Union.
Yeah.
The New World Order thing, obviously, when it does get promoted, it gets promoted in some of the most ridiculous ways. I've always held the position that whether you took Alex Jones, Ron Paul, Marxists, socialists, environmentalists, we all know something is wrong.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the system is not working.
Right.
And to what it is that we feel that system should be doing obviously varies according to person. We all know something's not working, and we're all carrying out our particular beliefs of what's wrong and what it's doing, but we're all aware on some level that something's not working. I mean, if you take the idea of the Illuminati, and I used to really believe that, but then I learned how to do class analysis. Oh, wait a minute, you mean there's a group of rich people that manipulate world events to their own profitability? Well, yeah, it's called the capitalist class. Keep going to war? Well, yeah, it's profitable.
Profitable, yeah.
Then when I learned to be able to, criticize capitalism, like, wait a minute, this actually makes sense. This isn't a big evil conspiracy, although it is evil. It's that actually makes a lot of sense. It's not just like some abstract notion of people worshiping the devil, trying to control us all. It's completely logically out there. And that's one of the things that drives me nuts about Alex Jones. It's the complete lack of analysis of anything.
Yeah,
think about one of the rants he went on is that, look at this, communist conspiracy. It's telling us that we're all bad and that we need to be controlled, and then that's why we have to have big government. It's like, wait a minute, you're Christian, devoutly Christian, fundamentalist Christian. Original sin? I mean, you're the ones with the religious belief that we all have to bow to God because we are inherently bad.
Yeah.
So, we have original sin, and we always have to be begging for forgiveness. No, you're the one saying that we're all bad. Marxism preaches that people can be good or bad, so let's promote the good.
Yes.
But somehow, in his mind, that means we're all bad. That's just glaringly obvious.
He's out there. A couple of weeks ago, there was the Bilderberg conference where a number of elite actually do get together. Only 3 journalists were covering it. 1 journalist of integrity from The Guardian, the newspaper in the United Kingdom, and 1 of semi-integrity from Russia Today. And then you had Alex Jones, who was covering the protests from the outside. And he just went off on all kinds of bizarre hyperbole. He basically stated, what's going on now is they're discussing how to kill Ron Paul. It's like, you're better off watching nothing at all than watching
source. I would really like to see a source for that.
He's nuts, and you'll never find a source for anything that comes out of his mouth. It's craziness. It's unfortunate, though. I mean, he has built a name for himself, and occasionally he'll get a good guest, which I think do themselves a disservice by appearing there. For example, progressive journalist Greg Palast. Greg Palast is a guy that was originally a private detective and does a great job at looking at corporate fraud. mainstream media never touches him. He only appears on, say, Amy Goodman's Democracy Now!, and unfortunately, periodic appearances in Alex Jones, and I think he hurts his own credibility by doing that.
Yeah. This has gone so fast, but we have 3 minutes left, so I hope that that's enough time for Jason to finish this question and then to wrap it up and leave us with something more. It's been so great. You've told us a lot.
No, please come again, by the way.
Oh, yeah, we're having him back.
Yeah, sure.
And please finish. Oh, and don't forget your YouTube, www.youtube.com/user/Maoist Rebel News 2.
News 2. Also on Facebook, Maoist Rebel News.
Yeah. But Jason, please, I'd like to have your thoughts.
As we wrap up. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Oh, crap, I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Alex Jones can catch on to something once in a while.
Yeah.
But it's his analysis that's way off. Like how you can possibly think that corporate profits are communism.
No.
That doesn't make any sense. The mass accumulation of private wealth is the same thing as an equitable distribution of wealth. I mean, what?
Yeah, he doesn't. No, we have to warn people off the garbage and toward us.
Oh, I just remembered what it was. When he started saying that Rand Paul endorsed Mitt Romney, and he was like, "Oh, they've gotten to Rand Paul, and they own Rand Paul now." No, he's just kissing up to the guy who's in charge.
Yeah,
he's following his own rational interests by following the leader of the party. It's not a conspiracy. He's thinking about his career.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. No, as a matter of fact, Justin said it best, that he's a libertarian following his libertarian values. I'm into it for myself, which is what they preach. Self-interest, enhancing your self-worth, and so forth. And if you make your self-worth worth more, it just helps the people around you too, which doesn't work.
Yeah.
But perhaps you could tell us more about some of the work that you plan to do in the future.
Right now, I'm trying to get earnings up to a point where I can quit my job and do this part full time.
All right.
But that's still a little ways off.
Okay, but it's a great goal. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were planning to get a teleprompter.
Yeah, it's those things are insanely expensive. It's just something that would make things easier.
I mean, you have a great show, definitely. Where else can we see you? And I think you have a blog too, don't you?
Yeah, MaoistRebelNews.wordpress.com, and yeah, the same thing there.
Okay. So we definitely want to extend an invitation, and we'll talk and have you back. And people in chat want you back too. So it's all good. Thank you, everyone in chat. Thank you so much, Jason, for coming in and spending the time with us.
Thank you.
No problem. Enjoyable.
Good night. Brian and I'll be back on Monday
Yeah.
night. Progress Toward Democracy.
At 11 o'clock Eastern Time. Good night.